Oh, we have a great group. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Just hello to everyone and welcome to the latest in PetroAI Academy's webinar series titled, What's the Real Cost of a Frac Hit? We are so glad you've joined us today. I'm Rosemary Jackson, and I'm the VP of Customer Success for PetroAI and your moderator for today's webinar. So please feel free to ask questions at any time. You can send them to us through the Zoom chat, and we'll break periodically to engage our panelists in discussion. And also, if you have any issues, you can send me a private message in the Zoom chat. I've also put my email in there and my phone number. Shoot me an email, call or text. Just make sure you get in touch so that you see all of the fun. So today's session, What's the Real Cost of a Frac Hit, is led by Kyle Lamada, our VP of Analytics, and Richard Gott, our COO and CFO of PetroAI. So Kyle comes from a strong oil and gas background, starting his career at Hess and then developing his own data analytics company. He joined PetroAI, where he now leads our team of data science developers, innovating new techniques at the frontier of knowledge. And Richard has an interesting blend of a broad understanding of the energy service industry, and he mixes that with his prior work as Vice President of SCF Partners. And those combined strengths have made him a valuable resource, leading PetroAI into new and exciting directions. One of those directions has been developing a close relationship with TGS well performance data. Kyle and Richard are joined today by Matt Mayer, product owner of TGS. Matt's the lead author for the TGS Well Intel series, and he also has a strong oil and gas background, starting his career as a reservoir engineer working on assets in offshore Southeast Asia. So together, this team of experts will lead you through the latest techniques to quickly evaluate the reserves and economic impact of negative frac hits. They'll be using historical production data from the Permian Basin. So, what's the real cost of a frac hit? Kyle, Richard, and Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Internally, and a lot of us are well aware that unfortunately child wells, when they come online, don't produce to the same volume, same EURs, or same rates as their parents. But now we have a large enough data set where we can start to predict that sort of performance degradation from parent to child. But what occurred to Kyle and I as we were investigating some of this data is that there's also a detrimental impact to the parent well as these infill wells come online. And so we thought that it might be an underappreciated cost of this infill development, not only to budget for the underperformance of these child wells, but also to budget for the performance degradation of the parent well. But to do this, we needed a really robust data set, and that's why we partnered with TGS to help us understand and really wrap our arms around this problem. So I'll turn it over to Matt so he can share about the TGS data that they've been so kind to share with us.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. As mentioned earlier, my name is Matt Meyer, and I'm the product owner for the TGS Well Performance Dataset, which is the source of the data we'll be using today. At TGS, our goal is to provide consistent and standardized subsurface data, which allows users to hit the ground running and shorten the exploration cycle time. And I think this is demonstrated well by the picture at the bottom of the slide. So much of the production data that you see starts on the left with production volumes assigned to leases. And the industry standard step is to allocate that production stream to the individual well or well system. But with the well performance data, we take advantage of a suite of other TGS well data products to better characterize the wellbore on the subsurface. This allows us to take it a step further and bring production volumes and wellbore attributes forward to the wellbore level, which is as shown on the picture on the right. And this provides a better definition and clarity for unconventional and multi-wellbore systems. Some of the different products that support this level of analysis include the validated well headers, which validate header attributes and orthorectified surface locations. The workstation-ready directional surveys, which identify up to 20% more wellbores than are typically reported by the state reporting agencies. the most extensive well log library in the world, the high quality production data, which includes forecasting, legacy historical production volumes, and tabulated unconventional completion attributes. And then first rate interpreted products, which includes hand-picked tops, basin stratigraphic frameworks, and layer-bound temperature models. So with all that said, we're very excited to partner with PetroAI. We think the combination of the TGS subsurface and well data with the PetroAI's innovative analysis and visualization platform is a really unique solution in the industry. And we're looking forward to share that with you today. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Richard and Kyle.
Thanks, Matt. And so to share with some members of the audience who might not be familiar with PetroAI, I just wanted to give a little bit of a primer. Everyone in our industry oil and gas is data hungry. But what we found talking with customers is that while we have access to all these different data types, in order to bring those different data types together and do real knowledge work with these different data types, you have to do a lot of data manipulation in order to classify these data types against one another. And so what PetroAI does is we connect to these disparate systems and then deliver that data to users in a format that allows them to do more knowledge work and spend less time doing this data manipulation work. So as Kyle goes through this Frac hit workflow, I think you'll see some really great examples of how you can get different cross-sectional views of data in ways that wouldn't be available to you outside of the PetroAI system. And so the reason PetroAI exists is to empower people to do their most important work, not just data manipulation work. We want to enhance processes with modern software so that you can drill wells cheaper and better. And we want to help our customers consolidate their technology stack for G&A savings. I think what you'll find today is that there are different views that are available within PetroAI that you might have to go look in disparate systems to access today, but we make those available to you through a single pane of glass. And so the reason we're here today, I'll pass it over to Kyle Lamada, and he'll give you an idea of what this workflow is all about.
So what we wanted to focus on today specifically was really quantifying the reserves and economic degradation of parent wells that have had infill development around them. So we started by looking for parent wells that were originally drilled unbounded, and then within a few years, as the drilling development continues, we see these infill wells coming online. We wanted to quantify what is that economic and production impact to the parent wells. And to do this, we're going to explore the interconnected relationships between well spacing, infill development, production response, and then the economics at the very end of it to look at what is our actual NPV difference, so getting down to a dollar number. And then we also just want to show off and demo a PetroAI workflow that our customers are doing today. So this is not a consulting project. This is tools that you have available through PetroAI to run these types of analyses. The apps that we'll be looking at specifically within PetroAI, starting with the groups. Groups are used to curate wells, which means you can group wells by area of interest, by landing zone, by operator, geographically. So lots of different ways to curate the groups for analysis. We'll be spending a lot of time looking at this Frac kit scenario app. This is where we can calculate the well spacing between wells that are offsetting each other. We can classify parent, child, and sibling relationships. And then we can look at these different well groups to dig into the production performance by evaluating the forecasts and look at the decline curves before and after infill development. So after we curate the wells, after we find the wells of interest that have production degradation, we can update our decline curves, plug that in and see what the EUR looks like, but also run a full economic development to see what is the actual NPV difference between the well pre and post frac hit. The area that we're focusing on is going to be in the Delaware Basin, specifically Loving County. As we were thinking about this analysis and going through it, we landed on Loving County because it's got a nice history of unconventional development starting 5 or 6 years ago, where wells were primarily drilled to hold the lease by production. And then over time, as the wells, as the leases are drilled up, the operators are coming back and infilling those wells. So there's some really good use cases where a parent well has been producing for 5 or 6 years. And then over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen a lot of infill development around. So we can really look at the parent well performance, the child well performance, and the production change in that parent well performance during infill development. And so in this data set provided by TGS, we're bringing in the wells, the validated well header that Matt mentioned, the monthly production volumes for oil, gas, and water, and then the horizontal or the directional surveys so that we can look at the spacing in 3 dimensions.
And as Kyle mentioned, we can see this rich production history of infill wells, but you can also see that there's still a lot of work to do, particularly in Northeast Loving County, where there's a lot of infill wells to be developed. And so if we are going to quantify this degradation to parent wells, pricing this frac hit, that should be part of the budgeting process for the infill wells that we're going to do as we blow down the rest of this inventory over the next 5+ years.
So we'll get to an actual demo in a few minutes, but I just wanted to point out some of the key features and show some screenshots of the tools that we'll be using. That way, as I'm clicking around in the actual application, you'll have a good sense of, you'll have at least seen it once before, so you'll know what we're looking at. So with this, with our frac hit scenario tool, you're able to calculate well spacing in 3 dimensions. You can identify the direction that the frac is likely to propagate. And when we calculate the well spacing, we're giving you boundary conditions so that you can have some considerations for how far apart you think the wells might be interacting, instead of just providing a number. You've got some user inputs to define what do we think the spacing should be, what do we want to consider for interference pairs, what's the boundary conditions we want to place around this well set so that we can find relevant offsets. And then after that, we calculate all of the well spacing in 3 dimensions. It's also going to classify the parent, child, and sibling relationships. So very quickly, you can see how these wells are interacting with one another. And then finally, you can visualize the frac interaction in 2D and 3D. But what we really want to get down to is what is that production response? So having some tools to visualize when these child wells are coming online and looking at the production response in the parent wells and the offset wells during the infill development. So how do we make this run? The data required is actually pretty straightforward. We're going to be using well headers, monthly production, and wellbore surveys to run this analysis. And then we also incorporate the stress map, which has the location and orientation for SH max for identifying the direction that the fracs are going to propagate. This analysis can also be enhanced by adding horizon grids, which TGS has provided for the Delaware Basin. Wellhead and bottom hole pressures, if you've got SCADA systems recording this for the wells, we can incorporate it and visualize it, as well as the high frequency production rates coming off of the offset wells. And then some clients will have simulated frac geometries where you're modeling what the fracs might do, and then we can incorporate that and view those in 3D and 2D as well. And so we want to just point out that you can blend the data subscription data from TGS and your own internal data to have a really rich and robust well spacing analysis.
And to be clear about the stress map, Kyle, so this is something that PetroAI provides. We use the Lund, Sneed, Zoback stress map because of our relationship with Dr. Zoback. But internally, if your company has an internal stress map that you'd like to bring into PetroAI, we could bring that in as well.
That's correct. Yep, we pre-populate it, but then also have a loader for you to add to that. All right, so once we run the well spacing calculations and really start to look at these interactions between wells, we can look at this frac hit scenario dashboard. So some of the features on this dashboard, we've got the 3D view where you can interact in 3D space to see the wellbore surveys, the horizon grids, and then these planes of interaction between wells. We've got a map view, a gun barrel diagram to show in a vertical spacing as well as a horizontal spacing to get a good picture of how these wells are spaced relative to one another. Production charts, we can see the parent wells and the offset wells production histories, where we're pulling in those data and annotating the completion dates. So you get a nice visual inspection of the production response. And then a summary table which shows all of the wells in this offset group, the completion dates, and then the distances horizontally, vertically, and in 3D space.
And so here, we'll stop right here, Kyle. I see we have a question in Q&A. It's a little bit long here. Let me just skim it. Yeah, so I think this is, so the question in the Q&A is about multi-stage wells. Is there a case study where you can bring in data from tracers, from fiber, or higher resolution data? And the answer is yes. That's out of scope for this webinar, but you'll see as we click through the software where there are different buckets where you could bring in different diagnostic data types into the system.
Yeah, thanks for flagging that, Richard. Were there any other questions before we move on?
We only had one other question asking if we recorded the webinar, and of course we do. The last webinar is up on YouTube, and you can access them there.
All right, so one of the other tools that we'll be looking at is the economic development project. This is what allows us to, after we have a production forecast, calculate the cash flows over time and then summarize those cash flows into NPVs. So some of the features of this, it'll generate the cash flows for the PDP wells as well as inventory wells. So you can actually model a type curve, incorporate that into your economic project, and then run the cash flows on a rig schedule that it's drilling those type curves over time. So you can look at the full economics for the project. We also have a feature where you can incorporate debt. So if you wanted to model a loan where you're borrowing cash to pay for a development, you can incorporate those loan mechanics. And then you can also bring in your custom price decks. So you might start with a strip price deck and then incorporate that into PetroAI and then edit it or change the scenario as prices change over time. So you can manage all that in PetroAI. And then common inputs where you can adjust the CapEx, the different expenses, taxes, working interest, discount rates, and all of that for the entire project. And of course, it integrates seamlessly with PetroAI. One of the core features around PetroAI is just being able to connect these different apps together, so you don't have to leave the software. You can go straight from your forecast scenario, run the economics on those forecast volumes, or maybe you want to quickly generate a type curve of parent wells that you curated from the Frac scenario, and then run a economic forecast on that type curve. So all of these applications are very seamlessly integrated with one another. And to run the economics, we just need similar data that we talked about before, the well header, monthly production, price decks that you can customize, and then a forecast scenario with the PDP wells and potentially type curve. So the results of the economics, what you get out of that tool is a series of cash flows. You can see where we can adjust the price inputs, where we've got buttons to open up the economic and schedule inputs. And then there's lots of different visualizations to summarize the data. So we can look at cash flows over time, key cash flows. And then finally, we give you the option to download a CSV of all of those results and do some further analysis with it if you'd like. So I wanted to run through that pretty quickly just because I want to spend more time focusing on the actual software and click through it, which we can do now in the walkthrough.
So Kyle, just before you head into that, we've had a question.
Mm-hmm.
Could you comment on how the frac geometry is simulated? The orientation is given by SH Max. What about separation and extension?
Yeah, great question. So the way that there's boundary conditions that allow you to specify how far you'll allow those to propagate. So if you think about the fracs propagating along SH max, that's going to determine the direction that the fracs are moving. But then if you can put limits on how far you would want that to propagate. So if you think that the fracs are only going to propagate, let's say 1,500 feet, then you'd put that as a boundary condition. So we're not predicting how far that frac is going to propagate, but we're finding the pairs that fall, the offset wells that fall within those conditions.
Yeah, I think about it like a prism. If you think about a rectangular prism around the wellbore, you identify the width and the height of that prism, and then we're searching within that boundary for other wells that would be in that sort of volume of potential interaction. And Kyle will show you where those are all user-defined inputs, by the way. So and we'll see where that happens in the software.
All right, so let's click over to that. I'm going to turn my video off just so it doesn't cover up the screen. So now I'm sharing the map view. Richard, are you seeing that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so we're now in PetroAI. You'll notice that it's browser-based, which means to access it, all you need is a browser to log in, and then you've got full access to the entire suite of tools. So I've landed in our analysis that we're going to do to look at these parent well performance degradations. But just want to point out that we're in Loving County again. This is the map that we looked at earlier. So once we run this analysis and some of the inputs that we have to control these spacing conditions that Richard was mentioning, we've got some controls over defining that rectangular prism. And I've put in a distance of 500 feet in the vertical direction and 2,500 feet in the horizontal direction. So you can think of those as the prism boundaries that it's looking for offset wells for each well. So if a given parent well has offsets within those spacing requirements or spacing inputs, it will pull those into the offsets and will classify them and calculate whether it's a parent, a child, and all of the distances.
And
so
then
as an example,
there's also this 90-day requirement. And if you wanted to touch on that, Kyle.
Yep. So the last input is the sibling day offset, and this is used for classifying the sibling relationship. So any wells that come online within this window will be classified as sibling wells, and the wells that were completed before that will be parents, and after that will be children. And so that's used to quantify whether a given well, we can see the well label here. I'll zoom out a bit. We can see the well label, the completion date, and then whether it has children, parents, or siblings, and then which interval it's landing in. So we've taken the directional surveys and the horizon grids from TGS and are using this tool to also quantify and classify the landing zone and where it is relatively within that zone.
So when we were looking for good candidates here, we wanted to find unbounded parent wells. Parent wells, the when they were completed, they were unbounded. But then in the future, child wells were filled in around them.
That's right. So what we can do, we can sort this table by wells that have children. And we can see here that there's several pads that have lots of infill development. We see 12 children, 9 children. So some of these have children themselves, some have their own parents, some have siblings that were completed within the same time window. And so we found that this one was a really interesting example. Red Draw. It was completed in 2015, and there were several years where this well produced without any offset production. But then over the last couple of years, there was 8 child wells that were infilled around it. And this is also interesting because it's in this portion of Loving County where we've got a lot of wells that haven't been drilled. So here's our pad on the left side of the map, and we can see over to the east, there's lots of wells that are just, looks like they're holding the lease by production, but have the potential for future infill development. So some of the other things to point out on this screen, at the bottom, every well has an offset well that meet those offset criteria. And we can quantify and calculate the distances between these well pairs in 3D space, vertically and horizontally. So the result of running this calculation is not only identifying the sibling wells, the parent wells, and the child wells, but also all of those spacings between each well pair. Okay, so I'll click into this one. We can view the details on the Frac Hit scenario dashboard. This is the screenshot that we showed earlier in the PowerPoint. So I've selected that well. I clicked view to jump into the summary. And we can see this pad on the map with a parent well located right in the middle. So this is an interesting one where the parent well is located in the middle of the pad. And then we can see on the gun barrel diagram how the wells around it were infilled. So this red draw well was completed in the Wolfcamp, and we can see some of the offset wells in different zones within the Wolfcamp, and then a couple wells landing in the Bone Spring.
Kyle, while you're on this page, could I toss in a couple of questions that have come
Sure.
come in through the question and answer? So we have one that asks, can you filter from the map or the table?
You can. Yes, great question. So let's jump back. So there's another well browser feature inside PetroAI that we're not going to show today, but it's essentially a map-based browser where you can do a lot of that spatial analysis. And you can use that to curate well groups and find wells by different criteria. But on this page, you can also filter. So I can open up the filter panel, and then some of the values in the table, such as whether it has children, parents, things like that, are also filterable. So for example, if I wanted to just find my wells that had children, I could filter this. I could slide this over. So now we're looking for wells that have at least 3 children. And that's going to take out all of those wells that don't have parents, or all the wells that are not parents. Yeah, so all of these fields that you see in the table are available as filters.
Awesome. And then just one more.
Mhm.
We have seen some stages don't produce due to various frac, reservoir quality, completion reasons. How do you pinpoint the non-producing stage and factor that in your analysis?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say that's part of this workflow. That we would rely on high resolution diagnostic data, maybe fiber, maybe tracer data, or some other data where you actually have resolution at the completion stage level. And then in this analysis, we're looking at production at the well level. So it'd be really hard to pull out that relationship for a given stage.
Yeah, so this is a really cool example here, Kyle. So you can sort of, piece it together in your head with the map view and the gun barrel view. But I think one thing that's really unique about PetroAI is how we can sort of present it to you in a 3D view.
Yeah, so here's the 3D pad view. A couple of things to point out on this pad. We can see the different wellbore surveys. The purple one is the active well. That's the parent well that we're focused on. And there's a couple wells that were drilled on the same pad, but the majority of these child wells were drilled on a separate pad coming from a different direction. And the gray tops are indicating the formations. So we've got the Bone Spring, the top of the Wolf Camp, and the middle Wolf Camp. So you can fly around in here, you can zoom in, and you can really start to see how these wells might interact with each other in 3D space.
So we talked about that prism where you're searching for interference candidates. So we're using the term Frac hit to identify potential interference pairs. So here, these green planes, these are all the wells that appeared in that sort of volumetric search around our wellbore, according to those criteria that we put in at the beginning. And then when we look at the production profile, we'll see that there was indeed a detrimental effect on the parent well.
That's right. So if we close this, I can select the parent well, and that's going to highlight the parent well production trend. And so just eyeballing this, you can sort of see that it had a fairly flat decline, but then at some point in the future, that decline rate changed quite significantly, which is going to have a material impact on the productivity and the economic performance of this well. And just clicking through these, we can sort by the number of days offset. So we can start to see which ones were some of the earlier vintage infill wells, and then which ones were more recently drilled and completed.
Yeah, so this is really powerful. So you can see those vertical lines that are identifying the completion dates for these offset wells, and then we can track the production of this whole. It's not just one pad; it's 2 pads, right? But for this whole search cube that we're viewing. And obviously, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about pricing this frac hit. You can imagine not only the financial impact to that parent well as these child wells came online, but also the reserves impact to this parent well as the children came online.
That's right. So we'll jump into that. We can look at the decline curve before and after. I also want to point out that we've got the other production streams in here as well. Interesting thing is water doesn't have a significant change, but the gas and the oil do. And then I mentioned earlier, we've got the capability of loading in some other high frequency data sets. So we can bring in the wellhead and bottom hole pressures, as well as the offset rates for oil and gas. Okay, so let's jump over to the decline curve. So we've got a forecast for this well before what we think that decline curve would have looked like before the infill development happened. So I can zoom in on the production history. We've got our completion dates annotated. So here's the child well completions over time with these dotted lines. And then we fit a decline curve to the production history before this infill development occurred. And we can see the EUR at that point in time, our estimate was 591,000 barrels of oil, but obviously things have changed quite significantly for this parent well. So there's a couple ways we could update this curve. We could make an estimate on our initial production, our B factor, and adjust these inputs. But just to do a quick analysis, I can drop these control points directly on the plot, and that's going to fit a decline curve through this production history based on these control points that I've dropped. And so that'll update all of our ARPS parameters. We can save this as our new production forecast, and we still have the reference of our pre-frac hit forecast. And so what we're really analyzing is the difference between these two curves. So what is this wedge? What's the reserves impact? And then what's the dollar value tied to that? And so just as a quick look, we can see the EUR dropped down to 461,000. But to really quantify this, we're going to take it a step further and then run the economics on it.
And so before we do that, Kyle, I think we may have one more question.
Yeah.
Right. Someone has asked, they're just curious how the 90 days have been chosen for differentiating siblings from parents' children.
That's just the number that I came up with. Thinking about a pad development with that many wells, it might take several months to drill and complete all of those wells and bring them online. But that's an adjustable input, so you can make that 5 days, 1 day, 100 days. So that's just what I chose to use for this analysis, but it's totally customizable. All right, so let's jump into the economics. We've got the first scenario that we're going to look at is this pre-frac hit forecast. So let's look at the economics of that. And some of the inputs that we're adding to this project is that pre-frac hit forecast. So we've taken our decline curve of what we thought that well was going to do before it was frac hit, and we've added that as a forecast scenario. And then just to make this simple, we've run everything at $40 oil and $2 gas. So we're not changing the prices every time. We're just holding everything flat for both use cases. And then
PetroAI does have the ability to import different price scenarios, but in the interest of simplicity for this demo, we just chose a flat price scenario.
That's right. Yeah, so you can have the prices changing monthly or yearly. And then I'm also pointing out that we're running this as of August 1st, 2017, which if we go back to that forecast, that's really where we saw this development occur, this infill development occur. So everything's going to be relative to this point where that first child well came online. So we're kind of going back in time to run this analysis to August 1st, 2017. Okay, so we add the inputs, we run the model, and then we can see the cash flows for this well, and then we can really dig into the summary numbers, which is what we want to focus on in terms of the NPV. So for this well, again, this is just one well, that one parent. We have an NPV not considering any drilling cost of 8.4 million. And we can also look at the reserves for this well as of that August 1st, 2017 date of 331,000 for oil. Okay, so just to go back to the summary, 8.41 million. So now we're going to change it and put in that post-frac hit forecast. So that's the one that we just updated a second ago. I can search for that. Here's our post-frac hit. We can see the updated date. We can save and close this. We can regenerate our inputs. And this is just a preview of the wells that we're bringing in. So you can imagine if we're running a full PDP forecast scenario, we'd have lots of wells, but in this case, we're just focused on this one parent well and the price deck that we're running it on. So we're going to rebuild the model. So now we've got a new production stream coming in for this forecast. And when we rebuild the model, we can see that this NPV drops down to 3.87 million. And so the difference between that pre and post is going to be our economic impact. And then I can also click over to the schedule to see for this well, the reserves drop down to 138,000 for oil.
So this is something we think is pretty powerful, how you can keep your assumptions the same on your price decks and then swap out the input curves that come in. Similarly, you could keep the type curves the same and then swap out which economic forecast scenario, pricing scenario you want to layer on over top. And this is something that customers really enjoy, that they don't have to rework every element of a scenario. You can just hot swap one element for another as you're doing analysis.
So to wrap this up, we wanted to just summarize the results pre and post, focusing on this red draw pad. So when this well was first drilled, it was just the one parent well. And then after that, after the development occurred, we had 8 infill wells drilled, and we can see that the production pre and post, the reserves dropped by 210,000, which resulted in a drop in NPV by almost $5 million.
So as we're thinking about the impact for those other unbounded wells that we were using for HBP, our view is that if your analysis is indicating that on other parent wells you're seeing a similar performance drop, that you would need to include this $5 million cost as you're budgeting your infill development. Not only will you have to pay the cash costs of drilling and completing your new infill wells, but also you need to price in the economic impact of the parent well's degradation.
Right. Kyle, maybe I could jump in right now with another question.
Sure.
What can export as output from the map view or the analysis?
So from, let's see, from that first screen that we landed on, you can export the wells, the spacing calculations, all of the well pairs that it flagged. So really everything in those tables can be exported into CSVs. And then from the forecast scenario, you could export the decline curve parameters that were used to calculate that decline curve. And then on the economics, you can export the summaries showing the NPVs and reserves, as well as the cash flows that were calculated. So we try to make the data inputs easily accessible to change, but also have the outputs accessible after you run the analysis. You can take them out of PetroAI and do further analysis with them.
Yeah, a lot of folks want to go do further data exploration work in Spotfire or Power BI or Tableau or something similar. So we're happy to export at CSVs or other formats.
Yeah, it's also worth pointing out that we have all of the data in the backend database is accessible through our API. API is it's a application programming interface that allows you to query the data from something like Python or R or another application. So all of the results, all of the analyses are accessible. Once you've run them, you can easily get them out. Were there any other questions, Rosemary?
Yeah, there sure is. One more.
Sure.
The decline in production reserve can be attributed to several potential factors, including frac hits. How this $5 million example, how does this differentiate these various factors? For instance, geology, completion, efficiency.
Yeah, great question. It doesn't. So in this case, we're looking for a change in production due to infill development. We saw that there was a change in production, and we're quantifying what it is, but we're not saying, or we're not trying to attribute to one specific reason or another.
Awesome. Now here's an interesting one. Since you are on the web, how fast is the analysis?
Well, we were clicking through it. So some of the stuff was pre-built, like the calculation for the frac hits, we pre-built that. So I would say that takes a few minutes to run, depending on the number of wells. So if you had, let's say, 100 wells in your analysis, that might take 1 minute to run. If you had 1,000 wells, it might take 5 or 10 minutes to run. But all of the calculations are being performed on a server. So the browser is just displaying the results. All of the number crunching happens on a backend server, and that can scale up or down based on the horsepower required, which includes like the number of users, the amount of data that you have that are accessing it. So the browser is really just the front end. So it does, you have to load the pages to see the visualizations, but all of the processes are occurring on a cloud server.
And then to be clear, for each of our customers, they each have their own independent cloud instance. So we do not have one big pool of data that everyone can access, but rather we have different sandboxes that are allocated to each customer. So there is no blending of data from one customer to another.
Great. And just one more. You assume that you have the frac hits on this case study. Do you have any high resolution data down to the stage level to verify the type of frac hits and its severity?
Yeah, we didn't show that, but we do have, so let me click back into this real quick. So for a given well, if you have the high frequency completions data, we can visualize that. So one of the things you can do throughout this tool is click on a given well, and then one of the actions that you can do on the well is to view the completions data. So this would take you to another screen where you'd see all of the stage level details for this well, and then you could really see the timestamps. You could see the treating pressures, the proppant concentration, and all of that. And then also on this screen, you've got the higher frequency wellhead pressures if it were loaded, so you could see the second by second changes for the offset wells and the completions pump data for the active well.
Perfect.
Thanks for that, Kyle. And then I know we're up against time here, so I'd love to share with everybody what we have going on next quarter. So thanks so much for joining us today. What we wanted to give everybody on this webinar a sneak preview of what we're going to be debuting in the first quarter of next year. And this is a tier of PetroAI called PetroAI Community. And so this is meant to allow new users, people new to PetroAI, to get started with these connected analytics for free. So as you saw today, PetroAI is a single system for forecasting, for declining wells, for economic impact, for doing well spacing calculations, doing all of this through a single pane of glass, rather than pulling different data from disparate systems. Part of the challenge with software in oil and gas is that it's often expensive, and it's often sold through PowerPoint slides rather than somebody getting in and actually using the tools. And so our founder, you can see the quote from him, Troy Ruths, is really passionate about helping oil and gas sort of distribute software the same way other industries do. And the way other industries are delivering modern software is through a free tier. We're familiar with Dropbox. You probably got started on Dropbox by saving things and then to that free system. And if you liked it, you kept using it, you would save more files there. And then if you're like me, now you're paying for Dropbox. So we wanted to, later today, attending to this webinar, expect an email from us inviting you, if you'd like to participate in this PetroAI Community tier and use some of these capabilities that Kyle walked through for free, we'd love to invite you to join this community. And not only that, TGS has been kind enough to deliver, along with not only the PetroAI Community sort of interface, for the first 30 days, PetroAI will be pre-populated with TGS data so that you can test drive these high quality data sets provided by TGS, and then interact and do your own analytics through the PetroAI interface. So we're really proud of this partnership with TGS so that we can deliver these connected analytics to the community free of charge and as seamlessly as possible.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. If there are any more questions, we're glad to take them at this time. Otherwise, I want to thank Kyle and Richard and Matt for being here today. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. You can contact us at any time. You can contact us through support or through my email, or any of us would be glad to hear any of your questions or comments, and we'd sure love to hear from you through community. Just everyone have a safe and joyful holiday, and we'll see you again in 2021 as we move into a new year. We'll have more webinars and more excitement at these edges of technology. So happy holidays, everyone.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.